The first cabin was bathed in a soft, warm glow from the overhead lights reflecting off polished surfaces and gleaming leather seats. The gentle hum of the engines mingled with a quiet rustle of passengers settling in, a low murmur that usually signaled the calm beginning of a long flight. My dad, a distinguished man in his 60s with neatly combed salt and pepper hair, sat in seat 20A, perfectly relaxed. He wore a crisp white shirt and navy trousers, reading quietly from a leather-bound book, completely at ease. The small personal lamp beside him cast a soft halo over the pages, emphasizing the serene atmosphere of first class, a stark contrast to the chaos that was about to erupt. I was seated across the aisle, a 30-year-old man with a tendency to notice things most would ignore. I watched him smile faintly at a line in his book, unaware that the peaceful scene would shatter in an instant. The faint clatter of meal service and the software of seat adjustments created a sense of normalcy until a sudden sharp voice cut through the cabin like a knife. "Excuse me, this is my seat." Heads turned, a few startled passengers lifting their eyes from devices and magazines. My gaze followed the source. Rachel, a 31-year-old woman with striking black curly hair, heavy-set but towering in presence, leaning aggressively over the armrest of a nearby seat. Her denim shirt over a white top clung slightly as she leaned forward, fists clenched, eyes blazing with fury. Her voice carried across the cabin, high-pitched, demanding, impossible to ignore. Dad glanced up slowly, calm and composed, his expression unreadable. "I'm afraid this is first class 20A. My ticket," he said, gesturing casually to the boarding pass resting on the armrest. His tone was soft but firm, a quiet authority that seemed to clash violently with Rachel's explosive energy. Rachel's mouth fell open, and she allowed a short, incredulous laugh. "No, I specifically booked this seat. You can't just—" She stopped mid-sentence, flustered by the firmness in his voice and the fact that other passengers had begun to look on with curiosity. The flight attendants, immediately sensing the storm, stepped forward, hands folded, ready to intervene with tact. I felt my pulse quicken. This wasn't just a disgruntled passenger. This was full-blown entitlement in motion. Rachel's anger radiated, shaking her slightly as she jabbed a finger toward my dad's seat. "Sir, I think you're in my seat," she said again, louder, the words sharp and insistent. My dad's response was almost serene in its simplicity. "No, ma'am. This seat belongs to me. I've confirmed with the crew." Her face turned crimson. The tension in the cabin escalated. Murmurs rippled among passengers, some subtly raising phones, capturing the moment. Her lips trembled as she tried to regain composure, but the rising steam of her indignation was impossible to contain. "I don't care what the crew says," she shouted, slamming a hand on the armrest, making the leather squeak under the force. "I paid for first class. I demand it." I stepped closer, keeping my voice steady. "Rachel, please, my dad is not moving. The attendants will handle this. You need to take your assigned seat." Her gaze snapped toward me, wide-eyed and furious. "And who are you?" "Some kid trying to boss me around. I don't take orders." The cabin air grew thick, the hum of engines now drowned by the tension radiating between us. Passengers leaned forward, some curious, some annoyed, others secretly amused. I noticed subtle movements, fingers hovering over phones, capturing every moment. The seeds of public exposure were already planted, though Rachel had no idea. A flight attendant stepped forward, their voice calm, but firm. "Mom, may I see your boarding pass?" Rachel waved it dramatically, her movements exaggerated, as if the simple piece of paper could assert her will over the universe. "This is my seat. I will not be moved. I paid extra for this." Dad remained unmoved. His posture relaxed, but his eyes sharpened slightly, a faint smirk forming at the corners of his lips. He exuded quiet power, the kind that comes from patience and experience, a stark contrast to Rachel's volatility. I leaned close to my dad, whispering under my breath, "This is insane. She can't actually be serious." He gave a subtle nod, the kind of gesture that suggested he was aware of the storm, but unshaken by it. "Let's see how far she goes," he murmured. Rachel's pacing increased, the sharp thump of her heels against the aisle floor punctuating each word she spat out. "I will not sit in a second-class seat. I am paying for luxury." Her voice rose with each syllable, demanding attention, claiming space in a way that made every passenger feel the tension like a physical weight. I took a deep breath, realizing that reason wouldn't work. Her arrogance was too entrenched. Logic had no effect on entitlement. There was no compromise to be found in shouting matches, no calm discussion to settle her fury. Every glance she threw in my dad's direction was laden with aggression, each movement carefully choreographed by her sense of self-importance. Passengers were now fully aware, some whispering, some filming discreetly, some just staring, transfixed. Her voice had escalated from demanding to explosive, and it was clear that the situation would not resolve quietly. The flight attendants flanked her subtly, signaling that escalation could be costly, but there was no physical intervention yet. I felt a mixture of disbelief and quiet anticipation. This was no ordinary confrontation. This was the opening act of a drama that promised a spectacle. My dad's calm presence contrasted so sharply with Rachel's fury that the tension became almost cinematic. It was a standoff electric with a promise of conflict. The cabin itself becoming a stage, I whispered again, half to myself and half to him. "We can't just let this slide." He chuckled softly, eyes never leaving hers. "Not necessary. Let her dig her own hole." Rachel's fury was reaching a peak. Her chest heaved, fists clenched tighter, the veins in her neck pulsing visibly. She glared around the cabin, sensing the judgmental gazes, but not enough to stop her. If anything, the attention seemed to fuel her rage. She leaned closer, her voice dropping into a threatening hiss. "You will regret this, I will make sure of it." Her words hung in the air, a challenge thrown, a promise of chaos. The cabin felt suspended in time, all eyes on the confrontation. Every muscle in her body radiated aggression, while my dad's calm smile only made her more unsettled. I realized in that moment that this was no ordinary encounter. The conflict had begun, and the resolution would require more than patience. It would require strategy. The scene ended with Rachel standing in the aisle, trembling with fury, fists still clenched, while my dad remained seated, composed, almost amused, as if silently daring her to continue. The tension was unbearable, but the outcome remained uncertain, hanging on the edge of escalation, waiting for the next move that would determine who would dominate this first-class battlefield. Rachel's chest heaved as she continued pacing the aisle, her heels clicking sharply against a polished floor, each step punctuating the tension she radiated. Passengers were fully engaged now, some whispering, some raising their phones to discreetly capture her outburst. My dad remained perfectly still, leaning back in his seat, eyes calm but sharp, taking in every movement, every flare of her temper. He didn't need to speak. His presence alone was a quiet assertion of authority, a stark contrast to her frenzied energy. "I will not be made to sit elsewhere," Rachel shouted, spinning toward the flight attendant as if the very air of first class had betrayed her. "I paid for this seat." "This is outrageous." The attendant's calm voice cut through the commotion. "Ma'am, please remain seated. Your ticket is for 12C. Sir's ticket is valid for 1A. Rachel's face contorted, veins in her forehead standing out as she clenched her fists. "That's impossible. I paid extra. I deserve this seat. You are discriminating against me." I stepped closer, keeping my voice steady, carefully measured. "Rachel, listen. My dad is in the seat he paid for. The crew has verified everything. If you continue yelling, this will only make things worse." Her gaze snapped to me, a mix of fury and disbelief. "And who are you to tell me what to do?" Her words trembled with rage, but I could detect a flicker of uncertainty behind her fury. The passengers' eyes darted between the three of us. Some whispered to neighbors, others raised phones higher, capturing every detail. The tension in the cabin was almost palpable, an invisible pressure pressing on everyone. My dad adjusted his posture, folding his hands calmly in his lap, his eyes narrowing just slightly, observing the situation like a chessboard, every piece in play. Rachel was undeterred. She leaned forward, voice rising, fists shaking. "You think you can just sit there while I get shoved aside? I will not accept this. I paid for luxury and I demand it." The flight attendant took a cautious step closer, trying to defuse the escalating situation. "Ma'am, we cannot change the seating. Please sit in your assigned seat to avoid further complications." She waved her hands dismissively, exhaling sharply. "I don't care. I'm not moving. You'll regret this, all of you." I took a deep breath, realizing that reason would not penetrate the armor of her entitlement. She had dug in too deep. Pride and arrogance fueled her rage. Any attempt to argue logically only seemed to strengthen her resolve. I glanced at my dad, whose calm demeanor made the absurdity of the situation even sharper. "Want to handle this smartly?" I asked quietly, his lips curved into a subtle, knowing smile. "Absolutely. Let her dig her own hole." I reached for my phone, pretending to adjust the brightness while secretly beginning a discreet live stream. The idea was simple. Let her meltdown play out naturally, captured in real time without overt interference. Rachel had no idea that every gesture, every scream was being documented for public eyes. She turned abruptly, storming closer, her curly hair bouncing with each step, her eyes locked on my dad. "You think this is funny? You think I'm gonna let some old man sit in my seat?" Her voice carried a note of desperation, though she tried to disguise it with aggression. I could see the cracks forming, subtle but present. Entitlement was a fragile foundation. All it needed was a nudge. Passengers shifted, some whispering, some holding phones. The cabin becoming a quiet stage for the drama. The attendants flanked Rachel subtly, a silent signal that non-compliance could escalate beyond shouting. But for now, they were patient, knowing the situation could be resolved with the right approach. I leaned toward my dad. "She's a storm, but storms are predictable if you know the wind patterns." He nodded slightly. "Then let's be the calm in the chaos." Rachel had paused mid-pacing, breath ragged, her eyes scanning the cabin. The reality of being the center of attention began to sink in, though she masked it with fury. Her hands clenched, shaking slightly now, a testament to the pressure building inside her. "Fine." She barked suddenly, spinning toward the flight attendant. "Call the captain. I want him involved. This is ridiculous." The attendant raised an eyebrow but stayed composed. "The captain can review seating assignments if necessary, but the tickets are correct. Mom, please follow protocol." Her voice faltered for just a fraction of a second, though she quickly recovered. "Protocol? You're insulting me. I paid for luxury, and I will not be treated like a common passenger." I stepped forward again, soft but firm. "Rachel, continuing this won't get you what you want. You're only making yourself look worse. Think about it. Every passenger is watching. Every phone is recording. This could get messy." Her eyes flickered toward the passengers, and for a moment the mask of absolute control wavered. Pride and rage clashed with a creeping awareness of being exposed. She inhaled sharply as if about to erupt again, then hesitated. My dad leaned back slightly, adjusting his posture, eyes still calm but observant. "Let's see how far she's willing to go," he murmured under his breath, almost to himself. Rachel's body tensed. She was still furious, still determined. But the first seed of doubt had been planted. Her fists trembled subtly at her sides, her voice dropping just a fraction as she scanned the cabin. The subtle social pressure, the quiet awareness of hundreds of eyes upon her, began to intrude on the wall of confidence she had built so carefully. Passengers whispered to neighbors, some shaking heads, others stifling laughter. Phones were held higher now, subtle but deliberate. The cabin had transformed from a quiet space of travel to a stage where a single act of entitlement had become a spectacle, witnessed by dozens. Rachel's next words were sharp but less confident. "I don't understand. Why won't anyone listen?" I glanced at my dad, who gave a faint shrug, still calm, still composed, letting her energy expend itself. "Because," he said softly, "the truth doesn't need yelling." Her shoulders slumped fractionally, though she tried to regain her posture. She had not lost yet, but the first real crack in her armor was visible, subtle, but undeniable. She was furious, yes, but now she was aware of an audience. And for entitlement as grand as hers, audiences are dangerous. I realized the moment was right. Her fury had built the perfect stage. All that was needed was careful timing and a plan to turn the spectacle into consequence. The pieces were in place, the tension palpable, and the stage perfectly set. Rachel stood in the aisle, chest heaving, fists clenched, eyes darting between passengers and crew, unaware that she was now a character in a drama she could not control. My dad remained seated calm, almost amused, waiting for the next move, silently daring her to escalate. The cabin was a powder keg, ready to ignite, and both of us knew the next moments would determine whether her pride would lead to complete humiliation or an opportunity for us to ensure karma arrived in full force. Rachel's chest still heaved as she leaned against the armrest of her assigned seat, her black curls falling in disarray around her flush face. The cabin was quiet now, almost eerily so, the tension lingering like smoke from a fire, just smoldering. Every passenger had at least one eye on her, some subtly recording, some simply watching, captivated by the spectacle that had unfolded. Her furious energy had been channeled into chaos, but the realization that she had become the center of unwanted attention began to settle in. She opened her mouth to speak but faltered, the weight of observation pressing down on her pride. My dad reclined comfortably in 12A, adjusting his personal lamp slightly, his expression calm and untroubled, a serene counterpoint to Rachel's storm. His salt and pepper hair caught the soft light, and he gave me a slight nod, an almost imperceptible acknowledgement that the stage had been set for the final act. I kept my phone discreetly recording, capturing her every twitch, every muttered expletive, and the subtle but growing humiliation that came with it. Rachel's voice broke the fragile silence. "This is unfair. I should be in first class. I paid for it. Everyone knows it." The murmurs among passengers grew, but now they carried a sharper edge of amusement. Whispers turned to quiet laughter, and the occasional gasp punctuated the cabin's tense atmosphere. The realization that she was no longer commanding respect, but rather ridicule, began to dawn on her. She had transformed herself into the spectacle she had so desperately wanted to dominate. One of the flight attendants, standing nearby with professional patience, spoke calmly but firmly. "Ma'am, your ticket is for 12C. We cannot move the passenger in 12A. Please remain in your assigned seat." Rachel's fists clenched on the armrest, knuckles white. She opened her mouth to argue again, but the sight of dozens of phones trained on her, and the quiet judgment in the passenger's eyes gave her pause. Pride was a powerful fuel, but social exposure was an even stronger deterrent. She hesitated, her chest rising and falling rapidly, mind racing, every fiber of her being screamed to fight, but another part whispered subtly that she had already lost. I leaned over to my dad quietly. "She's at the tipping point. Just a little more and she'll implode." He gave a faint, almost imperceptible smile. "Patience. Let her dig her own hole a little deeper." Rachel's head whipped toward us, sensing the whispered conversation, her eyes narrowing. "What are you doing? Are you laughing at me?" she hissed, her voice trembling with anger and frustration. The tremor was unmistakable. Her control was slipping. "Not laughing, just observing." I replied evenly, keeping my tone calm, almost soothing. "You're making a scene that everyone is watching. You might want to consider the consequences." Her glare faltered for a moment, and she looked around the cabin. She saw the subtle smirks, the quiet amusement, the raised phones. Her entitlement, so formidable a moment ago, collided with reality. She realized she was no longer in control, that her fury had transformed into public spectacle. Her lips pressed tightly together, and a flicker of panic appeared behind her dark eyes. The captain's voice crackled over the intercom. "Attention passengers, there is a minor seating issue being handled in first class. Please remain seated." Rachel froze, her shoulders stiffening. The words were innocuous, but the tone carried authority. The captain's intervention, however subtle, signaled that this was no longer a private quarrel. Official scrutiny had entered the scene. I watched as her composure faltered completely. She tried to straighten, puff out her chest, and maintain the illusion of power, but every passenger in the immediate vicinity had already judged her. The social pressure was now undeniable, and it compounded the humiliation she was experiencing. "Fine," she muttered, voice low, but quivering. "I'll stay for now." Her eyes darted nervously around the cabin, noting the cameras and whispered commentary. Even as she muttered, she couldn't escape the knowledge that her pride had been dismantled by circumstances she could not control. Every scream, every dramatic gesture, every word of entitlement had been recorded, cataloged for the world to see. My dad leaned back, letting the moment linger. His calm presence contrasted sharply with the remnants of her rage. He gave me a subtle nod, and I understood the groundwork for karma had been laid. She had demanded dominance, wielded aggression, and now, with every eye on her, faced the consequences. Rachel's attempts to recover were pitifully transparent. She straightened her shirt, smoothed her hair, and tried to force a confident posture, but her face betrayed every flicker of embarrassment. The tension she had built, once a weapon, now turned against her, each passenger silently witnessing her fall from perceived power. I whispered under my breath, almost to myself, "It's over. She's realized it even if she won't admit it." Dad's voice was calm, almost conversational. "She'll learn. Pride like that has a cost." Rachel's eyes met ours briefly, the fury still simmering, but muted by the weight of public observation. She understood finally that entitlement alone was powerless against reason, calm authority, and the subtle pressure of social scrutiny. She had been exposed not by force, not by confrontation, but by the undeniable reality that she could not impose her will without consequence. The cabin had returned to relative calm, though the air still buzzed with the remnants of tension. Whispers persisted. Some passengers chuckled quietly and a few continued to record, ensuring that Rachel's public meltdown would not be forgotten. She remained seated, fists unclenching slowly, the reality of her situation settling in like a heavy cloak. My dad turned to me, a faint twinkle of amusement in his eyes. "Next time, just let them make the spectacle themselves. It works better than arguing." I shook my head, suppressing a laugh. Lesson learned, loud, public, and unforgettable. Rachel's gaze lowered to the floor, her lips pressed in a thin line. The air around her charged with a silent recognition of defeat. She had demanded dominance, screamed for entitlement, and now sat in quiet humiliation. The lesson harsh but unavoidable. The cabin lights cast long shadows across the seats, highlighting the stark contrast. My dad calm, composed, victorious without raising a hand. Rachel, flustered, defeated. The consequences of arrogance laid bare before an audience she could not escape. As the flight continued, the hum of the engines became a soothing backdrop to the drama that had played out. Every passenger returned to their routines, some still glancing toward Rachel, who avoided eye contact, acutely aware that her meltdown had been observed, recorded, and remembered. The stakes had been high, the confrontation intense, and justice had quietly, unmistakably been served. And as I settled back into my seat beside my dad, I knew the story was far from forgotten. The lesson had been delivered, the karma undeniable, and the consequences permanent. Rachel would carry the memory of her public defeat for a long time, a silent, inescapable reminder of the cost of unchecked entitlement. The cabin come once more seemed to breathe again.